Hey, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, MLS listings. Hey, welcome to Open Forum. We're doing a special edition this time. We've got a few of my colleagues are in the panel with me today. So I'd like to make some introductions. First and foremost, Dave Wetzel. Dave is the CEO of MLS Listings. If you've not seen Dave or met Dave before, um, second guest joining him today, Robert Bustamante, Robert, Director of Compliance. So definitely wrapped up in and around this whole MLS listings NAR implementation that we're going through and that we want to talk about today. Let's go ahead and step in if we could. Robert, we want to start with what is known as an antitrust or a safe harbor statement, correct?
That's right. Good afternoon, everybody. MLS Listings is committed to compliance with all international, national, state antitrust and competition laws. This commitment includes the following objectives. MLS Listings activities will increase competition among its members by providing information to them regarding effective business practices. MLS Listings actions must not function to reduce competition. MLS Listings provides a forum for real estate professionals to discuss their industry and understand developments within it. But MLS Listings will not be a forum for real estate professionals to develop collective action plans that would reduce competition. Finally, MLS Listings will adhere to all its policies and procedures to minimize the risk of even the appearance of anti-competitive conduct. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Robert. I really want to start with, for if just in case somebody just came into the industry, right, and they haven't been around for the last 3 or 4 years as all this sort of, legal crescendo to where we are today. But could you give us sort of, where did we start with the settlement, some of the key aspects of it, and then certainly how did our board, pull it all in and decide
Yeah,
what was to be implemented?
yeah. So I think most of our listeners know that this started many years ago with a lawsuit, and NAR was involved in this lawsuit. It went on for multiple years, just as they predicted it would. But what surprised us all was the outcome from that. I think it was that last October, Mark? It seems so long ago
Yeah,
now
it does.
when it came out that NAR had lost that suit. And then at that point, NAR started working with the other side on what they could do to reach a settlement on this. And then what was it, around March of this year? I think they announced the settlement that they had come up with. Again, surprising all of us in terms of the different types of changes that we would need to be making. So um, that's that's kind of the timeline of how this all played out. But then in
Okay.
March, what we did was we started hearing about what is the actual settlement. And so, of course, NAR had to pay lots of money to the other side to settle, but they also had to agree to certain practice changes that they wanted to see. And they looked to all of us to implement these practice changes, and that's all part of the settlement.
Hey.
So this settlement's been, yeah, a long time in the works, and as of earlier this year, we found out what it is that we need to do. And basically, what the settlement says is for 7 years, the people that are part of this settlement have to follow some new rules, and that boils down to a few simple things from our side. It says that all of our subscribers need to have what I'll call a buyer representation agreement in place with their buyers, and they made the MLS the enforcer of
Right.
that practice rule change. They said part of the settlement was that um, anything related to comp was to be removed from the MLS. So before the settlement, we had changed it so you could actually make it all the way down to zero. But then through the settlement and the agreement that NAR came up with, said that we just needed to remove it altogether from the MLS.
Gotcha.
And that anything there would be negotiable between, the two parties, but not through the MLS. So the MLS is not allowed to facilitate any of that happening.
Gotcha.
And so that's the other part of the settlement for us. And so what you'll see is those changes happening. Everybody's probably read about these changes, and people know that we're making the changes in our system on the night of Monday, the August 12th. I think that's
Well,
coming
it
up here
looks like
pretty
it's
quick,
gonna,
right?
yeah, it's coming up quick. It looks like it's gonna vary, Dave. I'm reading, PM product management is they've been on this for a month, but as we get closer to that date, things are ramping up and we're getting final check-ins from vendors and all that kind of stuff. So it looks like Monday morning, CoreLogic will remove the information from the matrix environment. Monday afternoon, Monday evening, you'll see the listing management make its change. That's the stuff that we run. And we've got a couple of vendors that are sort of going to trickle in all through the week, it looks like.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a couple that are coming in a little bit later. The NAR rule said that it all has to be done by the 17th. The
Right.
17th is a Saturday, and I can tell you we do not want to make changes to our system on Saturday, because then whichever day those changes happen on, we'll get a lot of phone calls.
Yeah.
Getting a lot of phone calls on Saturday here at the MLS is not a good idea. So those changes are going to go in, because there's so many places that those changes go in, as you had
Yep.
mentioned, Mark. They're going in throughout the day on Monday. And so that's why I said for the most part, by Monday night, those changes will be in effect.
Yeah.
There may be a couple of stragglers on some of the products. I think Cloud MLX and Cloud Streams maybe a little bit later in the week. But Matrix and Paragon and Touch and all those are going to be done in place, finalized by the time you come in Tuesday morning. Let me say it that way.
Okay. And Dave, as Robert and I and Michelle, we've been out in the field talking at the sales meetings and the marketing meetings and such. We've always brought up the point that our board is taking a very risk aversion approach to this, right? We have really studied the legal side, and we're not going to be messing around here.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, Mark. And let's back up and understand why the board is taking this approach. So the way the settlement works is we have to follow these rules for the duration of the settlement. And here's the kicker: the MLS can be audited throughout the next 7 years.
Wow.
And to see if we are compliant with the settlement. If we're not compliant with the settlement, then we could be taken to court and we're no longer covered under the umbrella of that settlement if there was an audit and said, no, you're not doing the right things. So the board has taken a look at that and said, no, we want to be sure that we're covered under this settlement, and we do not want to find ourselves in litigation down the road because we were not compliant. So we wanted to make sure that we were compliant. And so the board took, as you called it, a conservative view of all the different things that are happening, and said, these are the rules, these are the changes, these are the tool changes and the policies that we need to put in place, so we don't find ourselves in court down the road and someone says, hey, you're not compliant, MLSListings, now here's what you owe.
Right.
We just can't afford that.
Right.
And so that's kind of the way the board looked at that, as they took that approach of what we're going to do, what we're not going to do.
Gotcha. And Dave, specifically for maybe some of our newer subscribers, our board is made up of working brokers, right? It's, we just didn't bring people in, that weren't but these are the people that have to get the job done every day.
That's true. So our board is mostly brokers, and then the associations have placements on the board too, which may or may not be brokers, maybe agents, but they need to be members of the
Gotcha.
associations. And so it's a collection of practitioners that
Right.
are out there doing the job every day. So they look at this and they fully understand, what would it mean for us if we were to be found not compliant and found ourselves in court some
Exactly.
number of years down the road while we're still under the 7-year settlement. So
Now,
that's
Dave,
not something we want to get into. Yeah.
right. And certainly, Dave, we get the news, you've been to the Inman event this year, the NAR event, the the consensus
Yeah.
is, and the DOJ has stated, they're not going away on the 12th of August.
Yeah, and what you see here, this is actually from an Inman article, and the picture that we're looking at here is the attorney who started all this and sued the industry, and he's saying that basically, I think we all know that our subscribers are very creative, and we've just changed the rules, and they're going to look to see what they can do to figure out how to get the job done. And what they're saying here is, and we're not making this up, this actually came from this attorney, that they're going to be out there looking to see if anybody is trying to skirt the rules and violate something. And if they do violate something, then he says they're going to actively shut that down. What that means is that brokerage or that MLS or that association will find themselves in court with this guy. And that's not something that we can afford to do.
Right.
And so that's why our board has decided that we're going to make sure that we take a conservative approach to following these rules. But I wanted to point this out to our subscribers out there. If you want to be creative about following the process here, don't involve the MLS in your creativity, please. I've heard all sorts of nifty little tricks on how I can do, create a photo in the list of photos that has 2.5 lemons on the table.
Right.
No, please don't involve the MLS on any of those creative approaches, because we don't want to find ourselves in the crosshairs of that guy looking for violators, because it would just be very detrimental to the MLS and the MLS community of people using the MLS. So that's why our compliance team, Robert's team, is going to be really taking a close look at things as we go forward.
Gotcha. And I guess that is a good segue over to Mr. Bustamante, who's got to take, what you have guided the board through, and he's got to make it happen.
He does. He's got the fun job of making that happen. I think some of the things I mentioned are pretty straightforward, but the biggest area of question that Robert can help us understand is the whole area around concessions.
Right.
And so I don't know, Robert, if you want to, I guess you'll cover the rules here, but if you can also touch on the concessions, because that's the question I get all the time.
Right. So, as a slide, I know you can read, and this is what the slide says, that we opted into the settlement so that we would be covered under the settlement and be protected from suits, similar copycat suits for that period under the settlement. And the settlement actually has three components. One is what NAR must do. We're going to be talking about what MLSs must do, and probably touch a little bit on what agents must do. So NAR changed their policies. MLSs are going to change their rules and their system, and the agents are going to change their behaviors and practices. But when we're focusing on the MLS, the first thing we did was modified our rules to remove the mandatory offer of compensation requirement. And we actually went one step further under the settlement, where we prohibit anyone from using the MLS to convey the offer of compensation. So we eliminated the offers of compensation. We're going to be removing the compensation data, the current listing offers, and anything in the past. The listing software, when you go to list a property on the MLS, will no longer have the fields for compensation or dual variable commission, any of those things across all the property classes. And then, as the team was saying, we're going to be actively looking in the prohibition for anybody attempting to convey in any manner the offer of compensation or commission sharing in the MLS, using the MLS to do that. So I admonish everybody, and we have a very cooperative community. Don't try to get cute. Don't try to work around it. It's only going to lead to conflict with the MLS compliance team.
Right.
On the next slide.
And Robert, just before we go, we've even gone so far as to make modifications to listing management so it will read words, right? And we'll come back and say, no, you can't use those words. Please change the words, and then we'll let you verify the listing.
Right. So we are taking a very conservative approach, and we're preventing. We want to make it as bulletproof as possible, so our brokers aren't exposed by an agent accidentally or intentionally making offers of compensation in the system. So our listing management software, to our credit, will search for keywords such as commission and compensation and will prevent you from listing using those words. Now, if you need to use that expression in some type of description of your property, for example, National Geographic commissioned a survey, or the Commission on Arts
Right.
and whatever,
Right.
let us know and we can help you, right? But it's gonna be 99. We did an analysis, and uh, those things just don't appear in the listings today. But
Right.
there's a scenario, a possibility. So anyway, we're working with everybody, and we're going to evolve over time.
And one of the many places I will insert, Robert, call us. If you have a
Yes,
question, if you boy, I want to talk about the commissioned artwork in my Atherton home, right, or the sculpture. Um, Call us. Let's we're all going to be discovering here as this gets implemented and we move forward. But give compliance a call and
sure.
let's allow us to help you through it.
Right, exactly. So concessions are a real buzz term right now, and Dave pointed out to me he wanted us to be clear that there's the three C's. There's concessions, compensation, and commission. And compensation and commission, and they're all different, but compensation and commission are really what we're targeting that cannot be used in the MLS. The MLS doesn't have prohibitions on concessions because they're a natural part of the transaction today, and they always have been, where sellers will create incentives for a buyer to be attracted to their property, whatever that is, closing costs or something like that. So there's no prohibition, and we're not changing that. What's happening is in the CAR forms, they're putting forth certain language that they're saying that it's possible to use in MLSs if they don't have a rule to the contrary. So we don't have a rule to the contrary. You can put concession language in your private remarks where the seller's offering some kind of incentive. But you have to stop there. You can't go beyond that. You can't say concessions for a specific dollar amount or a percent or anything that would, at least in any way, look like it's offer a compensation.
So,
So
Robert, what about do they have to be specific in um, sellers offering $10,000 towards the sewer lateral replacement? Do I have to be specific with my concession remark?
Well, you don't have to be specific with your concession remarks. You could put, so CAR forms have language like seller will consider concessions in offer, right? And that's the question we get most asked and frequently
Okay.
asked. And we do have FAQs. I'm going a little ahead of the program, but we do have FAQs that have those kinds of things. And the short answer to that question is yes. You can put that specific language or language like that, but you have to stop there. You
Okay.
cannot point it to any type of fees or buyer agent payments or anything like that at all. It needs to just stop there. And that's the way it is today. Tomorrow, like what Dave pointed out, if somehow there's legal maneuvering and that becomes too thinly veiled as an offer, then we would amend our rule and strike the concessions from being able to be put in there. But today, concessions are a natural part of the transaction. We've always had them. We don't have a prohibition, but be sure that you stop there and not make them offers of compensation in any manner. And
So
then,
Robert,
mhm,
one thing we might want to point out too is about the fields related to concessions. So
yes,
we do have a field that's hardly ever used when closing a listing. I think that was less than 3%, around 1 or 2% of the listings have that. We're going to be removing that field because it could potentially cause some problems depending on what people put in there. But we're not adding any new fields for concessions. You'll see some other MLSs will put in, say, a yes/no field for concessions into the listing, but our board has decided not to do that and just have that be part of the regular description. It's public and private descriptions, as Robert pointed out, but not have an actual field for that.
Right. And we get questions that, oh, I need that field. And we're saying, well, we've had that for 10 years. Nobody's using it. Why do you need it today? And the answer would be because they want to set prevailing market practices, which is troublesome. And that's why that's being removed, because we don't want to have the semblance of some type of collective practice for fees and things like that. So it's a good idea to remove it. I'm glad we did.
Yeah, and what Robert means by that is, say a year down the road, you go back and look at that field, and then you do a search and see, oh, it looks like everybody is doing X. Okay, so I need to go tell my seller they have to do X.
Right.
That
Yeah.
would be troublesome. So
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons why we said it's not being used today. Let's discontinue that one so it doesn't evolve into something that gets us into
Yeah.
trouble.
And it's pretty, I mean, we're like Mark was saying and Dave was saying, it's pretty conservative. We're being very conservative, but this is a billion-dollar problem, and it's not a small kind of issue. It's a paradigm shift. It affects 100%, well, not 100%. It affects all of the realtor MLSs and associations and realtor agents. So we're being very conservative. We don't want to expose any of our brokers or agents to risk. They've already been in the headlines. I'm sure they don't want to be in the headlines, and we're not going to be a party to enabling that. So that's why it may seem like we're trying to stop you from doing something that you want to do. And the answer is no. What we're doing is we're insulating ourselves and protecting you from accidentally or intentionally running afoul of the law and creating a problem for everybody. So I think that it's the right thing to do. And part of that is our enforcement. And so we sent out a mail a couple of days ago where we identified commissions in the remarks, commission or compensation or fees payment in the remarks. And we asked the recipient to remove them by August 12th. So you don't have to do it today, but you have to do it by August 12th, because on the 13th, it'll be a violation. And so if on the 13th you have a violation or you accidentally add a listing and you just used a template of some type, we will identify it, we will remove the language, and we'll issue you a warning at that time that says, here's the problem, don't do it anymore. If you do, there'll be a additional compliance activity. And that'll be, if you do it again, we will levy a pretty large fine. And then ultimately, if you can't seem to stop, we will suspend your access to the system. So we're very serious. We don't want anybody trying to be cute, work around. We're going to make sure that the system and our compliance team works very hard and very diligently to make sure that it's clean, reliable, trustworthy, and you can count on it, and it won't drag your brokerage or yourself into court.
Or drag us.
Or,
Yeah,
or drag Mark in there.
Yeah. So Robert, and Dave, your comments are generating questions, literally, and people are, so I'd like to insert a few of them. So Robert, let's be real clear on concession comments in the private remarks. Going forward, the listing agent can put seller willing to consider offering concessions, period. That is allowable.
Concessions and offers probably is what they wanted to put.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so that is not prohibited. It's not, I personally cannot recommend that type of as a practice. You should consult your broker to determine what they want for their best practices.
Okay. And then the second one is on the number 2 of the C's, commissions. Active listing in the system now. It's currently got a percentage rate in the commission. Do I need to do anything, or just we're going to go ahead and remove it for you on roughly the morning of the 12th? Do I need to do anything as the listing agent?
There'll be a system software change that removes that for the on market and the historical data. And so it'll disappear from the community. So they cannot use that to establish prevailing market standards or any collaboration or any semblance of antitrust. Not that they would, it's just that we want to prevent them from that appearance of being able to.
Gotcha.
But Robert, while that's taken care of automatically for them for that field, they should probably talk to their broker about what conversation they should have with the seller. Because at that point, that's no longer a required field. It's no longer in place there. So what does that mean from a seller perspective? And that's a conversation to figure out with your broker and your seller.
Right.
Good.
Right.
And Dave, what's going to happen downstream from us? You know, the consumer, if they were on one of the consumer sites, didn't naturally get the commission rate. But we have partners like RPR. We have partners like Realtor.com Pro, kind of stuff. We're just that data is being snapped off. We're no longer sending it down the stream, are we?
That's correct. So we have just under 300 different places that we send listing data out to. People often think that it goes to Zillow and Realtor.com and then stops there, but no, it actually goes to almost 300 different places. Quite a few places that gets sent out, and that information stops being part of that feed on Monday night.
Right.
So if anybody who's receiving that data and displaying that data on a public-facing website or maybe into their broker back office tools, it no longer is there. It's not in the data feed after that.
Gotcha. And Robert and I have been out talking with a lot of people at sales meetings, marketing meetings, and so on. And the veterans, we've been here 30 years, or I'm going on my 45th year, and guess what? What's old is new again. We're going to pick up the phone and we're going to call the listing agent, right? We're going back to some personal touch.
Exactly. That's not a bad thing to
No.
have that conversation. You're probably already having that conversation with them if your buyer is starting to get serious about a property, or maybe you want to call them and talk to them about the property before or after you show it. I mean, those conversations are taking place already. So now it's just another element to put into the conversation.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and all of that can be done off the MLS, right? Where that's not restricted. You have a conversation with your listing broker to the buyer's broker, and you can publish your offers on flyers, on sign writers, just not on the MLS. You could even put it on your website for your listings only, but you cannot link something in the MLS to a destination or a place that would have the offer. Like you can't put in your disclosures. And if
Okay.
you have it on your listings, you can put the link to your general website address, but you cannot link to that specific listing from the MLS. So we're going to be looking at any web links in there. We're going to follow them. So don't do that.
So Robert, let's add some clarity to that, because I literally right before I came on this show, I got a call from a veteran agent who is asking, my company gives me a single property website. And on that single property website, labeled with my logo, it's not the MLS, it's got my logo, it's my brokerage. I've got a commission rate in there. But there's a link on the MLS to get people to that single property website. Allowed or not allowed?
Not allowed.
Gotcha.
If it links directly to that single property website and there's an offer of compensation, that is not allowed in the MLS.
Okay. And you snuck it in there real quiet or real quickly, but it was one of the questions we got. How about if I put a sign writer on my, it's out in the lawn, right? And I put a sign writer on that says, certain percentage amount. Hey, it's not on the MLS,
Yep,
right?
it's not on the MLS. It's okay by us.
Okay.
But again, you might want to talk to your broker if he wants that kind of,
right.
street advertising, so to speak.
So if it's not on the MLS and there's no way you can go from the MLS to whatever format, if that link is there, we're going to step in and pull the link if we find out about it.
Yeah, just don't put it there. Yeah, just don't put it there. You would have to, after this forum, you would have to almost intentionally try to do it, and that's bad.
Correct. Dave,
yeah, so one of the things you mentioned too, Robert, was the flyer. So you see a lot of times people have a flyer on the kitchen table somewhere at the street. That's perfectly okay as long as it's not found, you can't find a link to it from the MLS. So some people put that same flyer in the disclosures documents. Oops, there's a
Yeah.
link from the MLS to the disclosures documents. So you want to
Right.
just be aware that if you're using the flyer, you don't want the flyer to be linked to from the MLS somewhere. But it's perfectly okay to have it on that flyer if it's not found from the MLS.
Got it. Now, and Robert, just, we want to be clear on all this stuff. So there's no gray area here. New scenario. I'm using Aculus disclosures.
Mhm.
And in my disclosure pack, the 17th document down is something that states that commission, rate, and I'm linking to it via listing management. Yay or nay?
Absolute nay. Right.
Okay.
There's no possible yay on that. It's
Right. Put that
nay.
document
Don't
someplace
get that
else.
document out of there. Yeah. Put
Okay.
it, but if somebody goes, hey, Mark, send me your disclosures, go ahead, right? Just, it's not
Right.
through the MLS,
Okay.
right? Just don't link to it to the MLS. Don't offer it to the MLS. Protect us and protect yourselves. Follow the settlement rules. And because I might add, it's a proposed settlement. So they still have to finalize it, I guess, in November or so. And so some things could happen. And so what we're saying is we're marching to the terms of the settlement today, and we're going to stay in compliance, and hopefully this will be it, and the terms will be accepted and it'll be finalized, but something could happen.
Gotcha.
Yeah, to that point that this could evolve, and we do kind of expect some evolution down the road on this. As we spoke about earlier, the board's taken a conservative look on this because of the ramifications to the MLS if we're not compliant. But I could imagine if we get a year down the road, we might have a different view of what conservative approach means. So we may see some evolution of this going forward. But right now, this is what the board and our council wants us to do to make sure that we stay out of trouble.
Gotcha. Robert, we get done with the show, and what did Robert say about? And I had a question on. We've got a whole pro support community built for you.
Yeah, most of the questions we get during these types of things are on the pro support committee in our FAQ. What about my listing? It has an accepted offer over the timeline on August 13th. What happens to that offer compensation? Well, that's answered in the FAQ, and the answer is that offer was made, it was accepted, and it's enforceable through arbitration because it was a rule at that time. On the 13th, if you accept, well, there's nothing to accept. It'll
If you
change.
accept it afterwards.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Stop that share.
So those are there, and we're looking for questions, new questions, that maybe we haven't answered, and that if you do have one, you can just send a question to compliance, and we'll be happy to answer it for you.
Good. Dave, let's talk about the MLS Alliance. That the meeting of the minds of the MLSs in Northern California around the Bay Area. Are we all going at the same time, or is my listing for that Fremont property gonna conflict when it gets over to Bay East?
Well, there's 7 of us as part of the NorCal Alliance, and we've kind of come together and said, what are we going to be doing? We're not trying to make sure that we're all doing the same thing because we wanted to make sure that that wasn't seen as some sort of conspiracy to work together on that. But we did want to make sure that we weren't breaking something with our data share with the 7 of us. And so we are all making the changes about the same time. They may not be exact to the day, but we are making changes in relatively the same time frame. So you'll see those things happen on the others as well. Not all 7 of us are NAR association owned MLSs. So you have Barry's, which is owned by brokerages, and you have MetroList, which is owned 50-50. So they don't necessarily have to follow these rules. However, if they don't, they could be potentially legally, in trouble down the road. So I do believe, and don't quote me on this, I think they are looking at potentially finding a way to get covered by the settlement. It will cost them money to do that if they decide to do that. But you'll see that they'll follow some of the same rules because they want to make sure that they're not, taking on legal risk if they were to be an outlier there and not following these types of things. So you'll see all 7 of us following similar things. Some may have a concessions yes/no field. We've decided not to have a concessions yes/no field. So we may see some slight variations there, but they're all doing the basic things around removing all the comp from any view, having the MLS be, the I don't like to use the word enforcer, but the enforcer for buyer representation agreements. So they're all doing those sorts of things.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I'm looking over to see what other kind of questions are coming in. We've answered a lot of them. Robert, where, Dave mentioned earlier, it was, seems like concessions is the, everyone wants to know about. Were there any other key, topics that you've heard, even on the national basis, that we need to stay connected to as we move here?
Well, we're looking at all channels, right? We're monitoring all activity and all channels for the industry. There are some countersuits in the northwest where they're saying the settlement is antitrust by its own nature. So we're keeping our eye and ear out. Dave is attending all of the conferences and he can hear the hallway buzz and what's happening on the national thing. But I saw a question in the in the chat here that said, if this is proposed, why are we doing this now? And the answer is you need to go to facts.realtor to understand NAR's position on accepting the terms of this proposed settlement. It's favorable to them as far as it not accepting them, and it's favorable to realtors as far as not accepting those terms. The extending the litigation is going to be super costly, and it could end up being less favorable to the industry than it is today. So I encourage everybody to go over to facts.realtor to understand the actual legal terms of the settlement. We are part of it because we're AOR owned. We have Dave knows more about, but we we need
Our
to do
6
it.
associations have ownership, so we have to follow it.
Right. And so we think that this would be the smart move is to do it and say, yes, we're opting into the settlement. We accept your terms. Let's move on. Right. Because otherwise this would drag on and only cost more and could ultimately being less favorable to our realtor members,
Gotcha.
subscribers.
Dave, we have a question regarding the concession, and you mentioned that some other MLSs are doing a yes/no option, right in their listing management, whatever tool they use, their input tool. The question is, why didn't we consider that, or did we consider it, and are there reasons why we're not?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mark. Thanks for bringing that one up, or to the person who asked that question. That was actually a lengthy discussion that we had at the executive committee level of the board and then at the board level. And the thought process there is actually, let me step back and say that the thought process started with, should we have a dollar amount or percentage amount of concessions in a field? And of course, we immediately said, no, that actually brings on litigation risk quickly. And so we said, we cannot have a dollar or percentage amount in a field because we'll just find ourselves in court pretty quick. Now, if you don't have that, then the question was, well, then should you have the yes/no field?
Right.
And so after lengthy discussion, we determined that the yes/no field doesn't really help a lot if you don't have the other field that gives you the dollar amount or percentage amount. If you had a seller that said, I don't want that. I don't want to see offers like that. I'm not going to accept an offer like that. That doesn't mean they're not going to get an offer like that. They still may get an offer like that, and they have to review that and see if that's something they want. If they say yes, well, what does that actually mean? You still have to have that conversation agent to agent to say, well, what is it that they're interested in, or what are they potentially open to. So there's a conversation that still has to take place. The yes no field, if you had a yes no field, doesn't short circuit the conversation. You still have to have the conversation.
Right.
So our board said it doesn't really help a lot to have just the yes no field. Let's go back to the basics of having those conversations. As Robert was pointing out before, those conversations are key to this negotiation process. And the yes no field just didn't bring a lot of value at that point.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
and I want to add real quick to dovetail on Dave's logic. That removing the closing credits or concessions, we're often asked, "Hey, I can't run my CMA now," and blah blah blah. Well, we had less than 3% using them prior to this removal. It's not a reasonable argument to say that the industry, our community, had been using that vigorously as part of their business practices. So removing them demonstrates that we're aware of the requirements on the settlement, but adding anything also would indicate to anybody providing any type of scrutiny that clearly that change was to circumvent or work around the offer of compensation coming out of the MLS. So there's a lot of logic behind it, and the part of a best practice to stay where you're at. If you have concessions, you allow them, stay that way. Don't augment it or make it more better to make offers in the MLS. And if you have something that's not being used, you should just take it away so that it can't start being used to create a prevailing market type analysis. So I think those are all really good practices by our board.
Gotcha. Robert, I want to not veer off track, but I definitely want to go to an area you briefly spoke about, which is forms. Now, I want to
Yeah,
start specifically with the broker buyer agreement, and Dave, definitely come in on this one because we've got a
right.
scenario that's been placed, and I'm just going to read the scenario for you. Is it illegal to show a property to a buyer without a signed buyer broker form? That's the first question. So let's start with that one. Robert, you want to comment on
Well,
that?
it's yeah. Well, so using the term illegal use loosely,
Yes.
that would be a violation of our new buyer agreement rule.
Okay.
And
If you're,
we would,
yeah,
Okay.
if you're representing them, you need to have that agreement in place.
yeah.
Okay.
So that's how that works.
Okay.
You
So
would be in violation of the rule. Don't do it. Get a buyer agreement before you show properties.
right. So that those customers walk in the front door. I'm the listing agent, right? I ask the question. I need to have the agreement signed. Robert, you're holding up your finger like, wait a second.
Well, there's scenarios,
Yes,
right?
and I've got another. I've got a
Yeah.
B, a part B to this
So,
question.
we always get the what if I'm walking by and somebody says, so we can't cover all the practitioner scenarios,
Right.
right? We suggest you speak to CAR Legal, the CAR webinars, NAR webinars, and your broker regarding what do you want us to do if I'm showing a home, but I'm not the listing agent, and an unrepresented client comes in. What do I do? And it depends on what they're asking and
Right.
these types of things, right?
Right.
So that's what you would do. The new forms are something that, and I think Dave pointed out that he was at the NAR conference where they said, well, who's going to enforce all this? And the one slide said MLSs,
Yeah.
and there was a collective groan, right? Going, oh my gosh, right? So it is new to us to enforce this form. And so we are going to do it to the best of our ability within the rule, but all the scenarios and the new MLSA and Section 5B2 and that kind of language, those things you should get cleared up with your broker or CAR themselves or PRDS.
Good. So let's go to part B, and then I've got another Dave question because that Dave, he's an interesting one.
I know.
Okay, so part B. I'm representing the seller. Okay, I'm the listing agent. The buyer's agent is out of town and is asking me to show my listing to their buyer. Can I do it? We'll
At
go to
that
Dave
point,
for
are
that
you
one.
showing it to them, or you're opening up the house so they can look at it?
right? Are you going to provide any,
Whoa. Okay.
yeah, are you providing counsel about the price, quality, and that
Attributes
kind
of
of
the
thing?
home.
Yeah.
So if I
That's where
just
you
open up
start
the
venture.
door and let them in, I'm good, right?
Good.
I don't have to have the but if I'm going in
And
and
if
talking about the granite countertops, then I better have
you're
that buyer
you're
broker.
venturing into a space you don't want to be in if you're starting
Gotcha.
to give them advice on what's going on in the house.
Okay.
But
Okay.
if you're opening it up and you're saying, "Oh, you had a question on that," be sure to call your agent.
Right.
That's
Absolutely.
different.
So, Dave, the part I was going to ask you about, because you've been known to just go to open houses.
I do that.
You
I
know,
do that.
you may look
Many of
up,
you have
ladies and
seen me
gentlemen.
just
He's our secret
is
shopper.
I am yes, I don't exactly look like this when I walk in on a weekend, but yeah, I go into open house. I'm very curious about the traffic that people are getting throughout the year on their open houses. And so I go in and I chat with the listing agent. If it's they're not busy with showing the house with different clients. But yeah, I do that. And I try to do that as often as I can. I don't get out as much as I'd like to, but I do.
Okay. Um, so, folks, practice on Dave. Right? He's a good sport. He'll help you out there. But Dave, that goes. I want to go back to, and you briefly mentioned it. I think Robert has as well. Um, Check with your broker. Check with your office manager if you've got a question, right, on these nuances. And I saw him in the driveway only. Am I still obligated? This is a lot of, let's just all be checking with each other, right? Checking in, giving the feedback that we're going to need moving forward. But checking with your broker or office manager can alleviate some of these questions.
Definitely.
Um, let me see what Michelle's got for me here because we've got a few minutes left. Um, Interesting. Robert, let's talk about what we've heard in the industry, the value of the home. How do we value homes now that compensation will not be widely shared? Now we've
Well,
heard this from the appraiser's perspective.
yeah, that's a puzzlement that I've had. So there was a video that I saw from a Sacramento appraiser who talked about everything being equal on a home. This one was sold higher than the other. And so he
Okay,
needed to find out why the price was different so he could establish market values for other properties. That's when the transaction exchange of monies would be important, I believe. So it's a very limited scenario because when you look at the conventional listing, you'll see an offer of cooperative compensation. You don't get the commission, right? What the listing broker earned. So that's really only not even half. You don't even know if that's half of the story. So I don't know that appraisers are taking the offer of compensation and any closing cost concessions and trying to establish value that way with only half of the picture.
right,
Right? I don't think they can do that. I don't think that they're able to do that under the charters or oversight that they have from their licensing body and the appraisal community. So I think it's sort of a thumbnail view or knee jerk response that it was something that they thought that they had because they could see what was being paid out. But how that ties to market valuations is still not very clear to me as to what you're losing because you didn't have the whole picture, right? And so, what are they guessing that it was 50%? Or, I
right.
mean, how can you guess? It's like, so I don't think that I see it come through. And I've asked the appraisers, and they generally, after some consideration or thought, they would say, well, yeah, we have to call the guy anyways. But it's only really when you have 3 bedroom, 2 bath on the exact same street, similar very similar.
Right,
One was the closing price was definitely different. Something happened in there. What happened? Well, this seller gave a bunch of concessions away or something like that. Well, how does that affect the value? And that they go through their formulas and they do those kinds of things, right? So I just don't see this little bit of component where the offer compensation is not being made through the MLS really affects the value of a home in, my neighborhood.
Right, right. Dave, a couple extra questions on syndication specific to the public websites, the Zillows and Realtor.com environments. Um, the we're going to shut off some data, but do we know how they're going to handle it down at the other end of the stream? I mean, imagine just if commission no longer comes down to a Zillow environment, they're just going to have to scrap it. Now we're taking all the historical data out as well. Will all the historical data downstream also be removed?
That's a great question, Mark. So we're taking it out of the data feeds. We're keeping the data actually in our database. So some people have asked for some technical details of what we're doing. We're just not making it visible. We're not making it go out through the data feeds, and we're keeping it there in case sometime in the future there's something that reverses and we want to bring it back.
Gotcha.
But what will those websites downstream do with that? I'm not sure exactly what they're going to be doing on the historical listings is the question, because that's where that data was before. But as you go forward, they won't have that data on anything that's listed, after the date next week. And if there is another enforcement rule that's part of this that we didn't mention, and that is that if for some reason they decide they want to collect all that data individually from all of the listing agents and put it onto their site, then all of a sudden they've replicated all of the commission numbers from different brokerages.
Right.
We're required at that point to cut their data feed. So what the courts wanted to do is to make sure that there was not a different mechanism that replicates the MLS, but is not the MLS. So it's okay over there, just not over here.
Right.
So if they're getting the data from the MLS and they start posting things that are comp-related numbers from multiple brokers, then they can no longer have our data feed, and we have to cut it.
Okay. And Robert, on that subject of enforcement, a few ending questions on how big is the fine? If I'm caught doing it twice, what's going to happen? You mentioned severe, I think was the word you used, possible suspension and expulsion. But are there specific
let me
dollar
jump
amounts?
in here, Mark, before Robert has any specific dollar amounts. What the board first did was the board gave some guidance to the Rules Committee. And the guidance they gave to the Rules Committee was, we want to continue the process that we have today when someone has a violation is educational. So if it's the first time they've ever done something and it's for the most part, we try to educate them. There are some things, there are particular things where the horse is out of the barn, you can't do anything about it, and you have to find. But the majority of cases, we educate the subscriber about what they did wrong and give them the opportunity to fix it. Now, if they ever do it again, then that's where citations come in. Right. The guidance that the board gave to the Rules Committee was, we want to have that same process of educate them first, but if there's a repeat violation, the board didn't give specific amounts to the Rules Committee to consider. What they gave them to consider was make the citations strong and escalating. And now it's up to the Rules Committee to bring those numbers back to the next board meeting to vote on. And so it hasn't been fully voted on in terms of what those numbers are.
Gotcha.
But know that the guidance that they were given was for repeat violations, strong and escalating. And the reasoning behind that is that if the MLS is audited for compliance and found to be out of compliance, then we find ourselves in court.
Yes.
And that's something that the board does not want to happen. So we wanted to make sure that we gave them the opportunity to learn from their first offense, but then if they're continue to do it, strong and escalating. And what
Strong
that
and
actually equates to, we'll find out after the August board meeting.
good. Robert, anything you want to add before I add to that?
No, just
Okay,
be very forthright, and don't use the MLS to convey compensation, period.
gotcha. And Dave, as we move to the end of the show, for years since the start of MLSs, we were known as our purpose was the Robert, fill in the words for me, the um, the agreement between brokers for compensation, right? You've got more techie words that you use over there in the rule book area, but that was essentially that was it. Um,
Purpose.
purpose, right? The
Yeah,
purpose.
our purpose was to make sure they were going to get paid.
Yeah. Now
Part of
we're
our
going
purpose.
into a world where you just said, don't ever put it on the MLS again. But you and I and Robert, certainly, and Michelle, we've been working with the clients. We've been working out there in the field. I've gotten emails from people of, okay, what are you going to do now? Who are you now, MLS listings? And there's actually a very simple answer to that of who are we now and who will we be
What's our
going?
value? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So our value, so if you only thought our value was to make sure you were getting paid before, you were missing some of the bigger picture of that. The bigger picture is we are a marketplace like no other marketplace for this. We have between 16 and 17,000 subscribers to our service. That is a lot of other eyeballs that are either going to be looking at your listing if you're the listing agent, or if you're the buyer representing the buy side, that's where you can come and find all of those listings. And it's not just going into Matrix or MLS Touch and doing those searches. I mentioned before that we have almost 300 data feeds.
Right.
That's almost 300 places where those listings go. They don't go to just Redfin and Zillow. People think, oh, they're just Redfin and Zillow. There's almost 300 different places.
And imagine, Dave, having to keep an eye on 300 places all by yourself, right? Or
Exactly.
you're listing to 300 places all by yourself.
Exactly. And I was talking to one of those big portals at a conference just recently and saying, well, does this open the door for you guys to get listings directly from the listing agent and not have them come in through the MLS? And this portal told me, oh, we would actually not like to see that happen because the best place for compliance of the data is with the MLS. And the MLS has been running a compliance team. Robert, how long have we had a compliance team? For decades. and and Robert's team is doing a very good job at making sure the data is clean and accurate and the best that we can have it. You won't get that if you just put the listing somewhere else. You try to put a listing. When was the last time you saw something on Craigslist and believed what you saw?
Right.
So the value is the quality of the data, but even more so, all the different places that the data goes and all the different people, all the other professionals that have access to that data. So
Right.
that it equates to a marketplace, which is the value of the MLS. And one aspect of it is going away, and that's the aspect that says we will guarantee that you get paid. At this point, if there are problems with that, then it falls under normal contract law that you have to pursue in a different venue than the MLS.
Right. And imagine, Dave, if every agent, every subscriber had to stitch together their own CMA package, and then they had to go find a CRM package, and they needed a disclosure tool or maybe showing capability, to go out there and try and put that platform together on your own when you're actually supposed to be out selling homes.
And making connections with your next set of clients and
exactly.
all that. So you definitely don't want to go down that path.
Right.
Yeah, and if I may, Mark and I had a conversation about the value of the MLS, and it's one of those things that, somebody had said, well, I don't use all of those widgets and gizmos, but you have access to them when you do want to use them. They are available to you, and you don't know whether you're going to need RPR. You don't know whether you're going to want to see something out of a ad builder, or you're going to want to use Cubic Casa. They're there for you. It's like you have cable and you have, you probably watch 13 channels, but you might want to go see ESPN Ocho for the
Right.
the something pools or whatever the bike races or whatever Dave's interested in. It's
Oh,
available to you, and it's a package that you get for your access. If you're only using 10%, well, it's up to you. You go ahead and use that. But there's a lot of people that will use 10% today and then 2% of something else, and you just have
right.
all this access to so much that is really, really super valuable, I think.
Well, and the data, once again, as Dave said, the data feeding into all of those tools is already accurate. It's already gone through, sort of the
Go through
compliance
Robert's team.
vetting process. Yeah.
Well,
Before it
in
hits
our,
that single element.
we have a
Yeah.
very cooperative community. We have
Yes.
excellent brokers and we have a ton of professionals. I don't think we're going to have a real big problem with this compliance with this settlement. Iowa, maybe Texas. Are there any Texans here? We can maybe they'll have a problem, but our community is smart. They know to get on with the business, do what they need to
Right.
do. I don't foresee any problem. And our system software makes things as bulletproof as possible, so you can enjoy your business. You can log in. You can use our new dashboard cards for market trends and all
Yep.
these really neat zippy things that we're doing. And there'll be a time when you go, "Hey, I'm glad we have it.
Yeah.
I'm
Glad I
glad I
got
have
the
this thing." Yeah.
package. Absolutely. Well, folks, we've got to, it's time to wrap it up. I do want to point out that we have recorded this. We expect to put it up on our YouTube channel on Friday. We're going to do some editing on it, clean it all up, as they say, and have it available for you Friday. Tell a friend. Definitely get over to the YouTube site and subscribe, so they'll let you know when it's available. Our pro support pages. We showed it before. But you're saying that's the place to go for the links and the videos and the FAQs, right? That's the
Yeah, and
place
our
to take
our
it.
compliance team is standing by, looking forward to helping you answer those questions that didn't get
Okay.
answered, that are burning in your mind. Send us an email. That's probably the best way, so that we can, gestate over and get you the right answer. Or you're
Right.
welcome to call if it's urgent, that kind of thing. We'll be glad to help you.
Okay.
We want, and then we're gonna use your question to answer somebody else's question and add that to our FAQ.
Right. And just just to remind everybody, Robert, you have sent out an email to all current listing agents with active, did you go active, contingent, and pending
Right,
listings?
all the on markets that's withdrawn,
Right.
yep, that they
If
have. Yeah,
if
it's not a warning. It's just a
right.
courtesy notice. It doesn't count against your warning. On the 13th, if it's not removed, it'll be a warning.
Okay. Okay. Dave, any parting words for our marketplace, our subscribers as we move into a new era in MLSs?
I think one of the things to look at is that there's some practice changes that we need to do here as professionals in the space, but these practice changes I don't think are huge. A lot of these conversations were taking place before. Now we have to go back to having the basics on the conversations.
Right.
So it's just work with your broker, your office manager to make sure you fully understand it, and just roll through it and make it happen and go on to find the next set of clients.
Folks, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. We greatly appreciate it. Dave and Robert, thank you for your expertise in the marketplace and for getting together with our people and answering just the machine gun of questions there. You did a great job. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Mark.
Give us
Thank
a
you.
call
Thanks,
when you need
Mark.
us.
Thanks, Outreach.
Bye now.
Bye.
Make sure to check out our Pro Support page for additional videos on a full range of topics. And don't forget to click that subscribe button on our MLS Listings YouTube page.